So let's look closer at one set of these obligations related to content moderation. So first of all, DSA is not about all possible content moderation. It only regulates a subset, and it regulates centralized content moderation that is done by providers. So only decisions of providers are subject to certain procedural rules, and they're subject to these procedural rules regardless of whether they're based on illegality, claimed illegality of content or behavior, or on the basis of violations of terms and conditions. Decisions of users to content moderate, to block someone, to remove something from their own wall are not regulated by the DSA. Similarly, decisions of communities that are independent of providers are also not regulated by the DSA. The reason for this is simple. It's the centralized decision making that worries us with providers, because that is the decision making where the power lies and the exercise of the power lies. Where the users decide on their own to block certain content or certain people, those are not decisions that are subject to the DSA safeguards. So how do the rules really work? So one way how to think about this is think about a content moderation as a process that has certain steps. So initially there's certain formulation of rules, and then there's either own enforcement by the provider, where the provider finds something and then removes it, or there's notification coming from a third party that basically says, here's a content that you need to remove or do something with it. So that notification is the first step in case it's initiated by a third party, and that's what I call here level 1. Level 2 is then the provider making a decision on the basis of the own investigations or the notification that it has received. Then it's making a decision, and then it's communicating the decision to the affected individual, and then potentially there is a chance to appeal this within the company. So DSA kind of follows the structure, but adds these distinct procedural safeguards. So first of all, to the rules that underline a content moderation, it says that they have to be fair. They need to think about fundamental rights of others. So that's Article 14. Then it tells companies that they need to design the interfaces to allow notification of illegal content in a way that obviously is user-friendly, so users can find it and can easily notify illegal content. Then when providers make the decisions, they need to explain them and be specific so the individual knows about the decision that is restricting its content, but also is able to potentially appeal that decision. Then the providers have some obligations in case they come across some content that potentially is criminal and also threatens life and safety of some individuals. They might need to notify to the law enforcement authorities. And then the individual who's affected by a decision, or the notifier who complain about a content, if they receive a negative decision, the content is taken down, the notice is not acted upon, they can appeal this within the companies. There are obligations that these appeals have to be free of charge. And then finally, there are obligations that if all of this fails, you can still go to another body called out-of-court dispute settlement body, where you can go and complain to get a second pair of eyes to look at your dispute. Finally, all of this is supposed to be documented and in aggregate numbers published and made public through transparency reports that providers have to publish annually, in some cases biannually. Now, not all these obligations apply to all services. Conscious of the fact that this is an extra compliance cost, the legislature has decided that particularly the contestation bit, the appeals, whether internal or external appeals, and the transparency reports are something that only applies to at least mid-sized companies. So if you're not a mid-sized company, you don't have to worry about this. And you only have to worry about it, about the appeals, in case you are an online platform at the same time. Now, the scope of decisions that are subject to these safeguards is very broad, actually. It doesn't only concern service restrictions and account restrictions, if you block account or if you reduce the quality of the service, or if you restrict the monetization options for a particular user, but it also concerns visibility restrictions, typically removal of content, deranking of content, but potentially many other visibility restrictions. So all of these are potentially subject to these requirements. There's some, they're still out of the scope, but quite many are in the scope and trigger these procedural obligations. Now, finally, who can complain? Now, in the system of content moderation where third parties come and complain, we are also creating an ecosystem where we want to incentivize that some actors, trusted flaggers, who invest to do high quality job are rewarded by being able to notify and be handled with priority to get sort of a fast lane. And the DSA creates a system for that. Trusted flaggers can be certified by local authorities, and they become trusted across the ecosystem as long as they do a good job. But we also have a system where we want that if content creators are affected by these decisions, they don't necessarily have to go and complain and file appeals on their own. We want them to potentially have assistance of specialized third parties, NGOs that can represent them. And DSA again creates a system for that NGOs can potentially represent users. And again, their complaints will be and appeals will be handled with priority as well.